Hi Gugge, heute geht es um das Thema das schlechteste Sonic-Spiel aller Zeiten und ich habe gleich 2 Videos in petto, die eigentlich genau dasselbe Thema umfassen, aber komplett andere Inhalte. Dieser Kanal hier, der hat das einfach nur geklaut, was ist denn das? Oder das ist wirklich einfach nur ein YouTuber mit 500 Abonnenten, der Name heißt? Beziehungsweise Name, ist Englisch, ist alles Englisch. Aber hier wird was anderes vorgeschlagen, ist von SCHLECHTESTE, Worst Sonic Game. Und ich glaube, er hat das richtige, ja, ich habe schon ein bisschen hier gespickt, der hat das richtige, schlechteste Sonic-Spiel aller Zeiten. Und der hat das bessere Thumbnail, deutlich mehr Aufrufe, 100.000 Abonnenten, liegt aber falsch. Ich weiß nicht, was mir zuerst vorgeschlagen wurde, aber wir gucken das jetzt einfach hintereinander weg. Ich mache Untertitel an, automatisch. Automatisch auf Deutsch. Ich hoffe, das taugt ein bisschen. Aber wir können trotzdem das verfolgen. Ich bin bei euch. So, das schlechteste aller Sonic-Spiele. Let's go, Gugge Mama.
What's the worst Sonic game? Not any smooth-brained individual would jump out and yell, Sonic 06! It's Sonic and the Secret Rings! Or it's gotta be Sonic Forces, right? And I guess I don't blame them. These are the main games that YouTube critic number 133477 go to when referencing dark patches in the series' history. But when you look past the dozen or so mean Sonic titles out there, you'll begin to be met with a lot more games to look at for a new contender. I believe the reason for this is mostly...
Man hört's kaum, aber ein geiler Remix von Mystic Cave im Hintergrund. Was soll das?
Well, like I said, they're not mainline games. They don't really have top priority from Sega, and we already know how the top priority games end up. They may not do it now.
Habt ihr die Sonic Colors Ultimate Glitches gesehen, die künstlich herbeigeführt wurden? Aber ja, die Game Gear Spiele sind auch ganz schöne Kandidaten, Alter.
Very much, but there was a point in time, mainly from 2001 to 2014, where Sega felt the need to slap Sonic onto everything. Java phones, electronic game consoles for babies, anything that could run something that someone could deem a video game.
2001 bis 2014, wie wir hier sehen können und an fast allen Beispielen, das war auch davor und danach der Fall. Was zur Hölle?
You could bet your bottom dollar that Sega were going to make something Sonic related for it. And because of all these different projects going on at once, many for systems that nobody really gave a shit about, it caused quality control to get a little... non-existent. I mean, who cares if it's bad? Surely not Sega. By the time you've gotten home and plopped that thing into your system only to realize it's a huge pile of crap, your hard-earned money has already been wired to Takashi Iizuka's new swimming pool fund. Most recently, Sega said they're going to make more of an effort to focus on quality over quantity. This is, of course, after the last time they apologized for making bad games and promised more.
Es war einfach Glitch-Using in Sonic 1, was wir gerade gesehen haben. Was hat das jetzt mit Quality zu tun? Das ist ja unüblich, dass man das wirklich nutzt.
Quality titles. Guess what game released soon after? But either way, I think I trust him this time. At the very least, Sonic Frontiers is looking to be more ambitious in scope compared to the last few entries.
Ach, das Video, das andere ist neuer, aber das ist vor 2 Jahren. Das ist okay. Im Erscheinungsjahr von Frontiers, okay, ja.
One thing I'll give Sonic 06 is that it takes longer than an afternoon to sit through. Like, sure, Sonic 06, Secret Rings, Forces, Boomrise Lyric are all bad games, that's without question. But you can at least look at them and find something to appreciate. With Sonic 06, I could endlessly praise its soundtrack and attempt at taking Sonic into a new age, with an unbelievably ambitious story and gameplay concepts, despite failing at it. With Secret Rings, I love the setting it places Sonic in, it's so unique for the series, just compared to the normal Green Hills or Power Plant. And the creative way of working around its low budget with the storybook cutscenes. Sonic Boom boasting the best animated cutscenes in the entire series, and Sonic Forces... You know, it's polished, I'll give it that much. But I'm talking about the bottom of the barrel. The lowest of the low. The Sonic games out there that are...
Sonic Schoolhouse ist aber auch, Bruder, das ist ja nichts, ne?
They're just so unbelievably flawed, so impressively bad, that they can barely even function. Are there any out there like that? What do you think? This video wouldn't exist otherwise. So here we have it. I'm gonna take a look at some of the perhaps lesser known Sonic games to try and discover which of them is definitively the worst. But first... my good friend Ellis Mark recently recommended me this amazing men's grooming product brand called Manscaped.com. They have sent me this massive package filled with many amazing...
Ich tue es jetzt vorspulen, weil es halt schon 2 Jahre alt und verjährt ist, okay?
This video.
Und Zeit ist Geld.
Now, our first game begins with a little-known company you may be aware of, called Nintendo. Stay with me here. Now, Nintendo came out with this game called Donkey Kong Country in 1994. It was a massive hit, selling 9.3 million copies, and undoubtedly a huge factor in its success was its unique presentation, boasting these snazzy 3D-looking pre-rendered graphics, using 3D models for the sprites used in the games. This blew people away at the time, despite how outdated it seems now, but for the time it's clear this is what gamers were wanting to see more of. Now, funny story. Well, less funny and more depressing.
On Sega.
But did you know that the people behind this fancy silicon graphics technology originally pitched it to Sega? Yeah, they talked about it quite a bit in the Console Wars documentary, which I'd recommend checking out, but according to employees from the time, apparently Sega of America were very much on board with using the tech, and wanted some involvement in making games using it. However, when the proposition was brought up to the good people at Sega of Japan, they immediately turned it down, not thinking it was a good idea. Again, 9.3 million copies. Good old Sega Japan. We can always count on you to make some of the dumbest decisions possible that would forever tarnish the Sega brand. Anyways.
Das war doch Sega of America, die abgelehnt haben. Warum jetzt Sega of Japan, hä?
I guess realizing the potential in these kinds of pre-rendered games, Sega eventually started to try and imitate the success of Donkey Kong Country, with one of those endeavors being the 1996 Sega Game Gear release, Sonic Blast. Why they thought they would try and replicate these kinds of graphics on a handheld system is beyond me.
Er überspringt ein bisschen. Also es gab ja Sonic 3D Blast, die haben das schon genutzt, aber was mehr Donkey Kong Country eher nahe kommt, war das neue Spiel Vector Man. Das hat ja diese vorgerenderten Grafiken, hat das so genutzt wie Donkey Kong Country. Sonic 3D Blast war da eher so ein Mischmasch und ja, dass es dafür noch ein Game Gear 2D-Teil gab, war natürlich ein bisschen albern. Ne? Und um den geht es.
But by God, they sure got it working.
Oh Gott, lass es nicht, ihr wisst schon.
And the end result was Sonic Blast, a game that barely anybody ever talks about. They're far more concerned with shitting on the console counterpart, Sonic 3D Blast. I find it funny how confused Sega were at this point in time, at what Sonic 3D Blast even was. I remember in the old trailers to Sonic Extreme of all things, they acted like 3D Blast and Blast were a Mega Drive and Game Gear port of that, but like, I think it's pretty obvious these three games have almost nothing in common. I mean, one of them didn't even come out. Well, two actually, because they also advertised a potential Sega Pico port of all things. Whereas we all know, the only Sonic games on the Sega Pico were Sonic Game World and the underrated classic that defined a generation, Tales and the Music Maker. Anyways, I refrained from talking about the actual game for long enough. It's bad. Sonic Blast is a 2D platformer where you can play as either Sonic or Knuckles. Knuckles has his usual glide, but funnily enough, I think this is actually the first game where we see Sonic having a double jump with his base arsenal. I guess they put that there to help you traverse around this game's horrid platforming.
Ich glaube, das ist richtig formuliert, ne? Aber Basic Moves, weil in Sonic 3 gibt es auch mit dem Elektroschild die Möglichkeit eines Doppelsprungs.
Let's face the biggest issue first, and it's obviously this game's art style ends up hindering the gameplay by a ton. I already have some issues with Donkey Kong Country, on how with its pre-rendered graphics, it can be a little hard to tell what you can and can't stand on at times, but here it's increased tenfold because Sonic is so fucking giant on the screen, he takes up way too much room. The controls are extremely sluggish. Sonic's transition to running feels so awkward and unnatural, which definitely isn't helped by the animation. Look at his max speed. This is how you're gonna portray Sonic's iconic run? Looks like he's trying to hold in his shit and get to the bathroom on time. Funnily enough, in the game's code there exists an unused animation of Sonic doing the peel out, but like, why not just use that instead of this one? Sonic just doesn't look like he fits in this world. The platforms and terrain are tiny, but his hitbox is just as small to compensate, so it makes even doing the simple task of obtaining rings a chore. Just fucking get it! And the level design is either piss easy or incredibly infuriating. This game has an especially bad water stage. And speaking of especially bad, these special stages look atrocious. I thought 3D Blast won the award for the most unappealing special stages in Sonic history with its bridge, but these ones take the cake. Honestly, the only redeeming factor about this game is some of the boss designs, like this one for Yellow Desert, being a reference to a character from Journey to the West. That's neat. Oddly enough, the game in Japan is known as G-Sonic. God only knows what that stands for. And there exists an extremely rare Master System port of the game.
Extremely rare. Ich habe ein Video gemacht, wo ich gezeigt habe, wie Rexay mir es geschenkt hat. Und ich habe diese seltene und wertvolle Version von Sonic Blast in meinem Besitz und sie ist luft- und sonnenlichtdicht verpackt.
Game that was exclusive to Brazil. The Master System was very, very popular over there, still being re-released there to this day for some fucking reason. They do have normal systems over there, but Sonic's Game Gear endeavors oftentimes find themselves being better on the Master System, due to the wider screen which helped with difficulty a lot, especially with Sonic 2. so I'd be interested in knowing if the Master System port is that vast of an improvement over the Game Gear release. Sonic had a lot of good games on the Game Gear, such as the original Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Chaos, and Triple Trouble, but Sonic Blast is certainly not one of them.
Alter. Ja, aber wenn er da schon Sachen nennt wie Sonic Game World und Tales and the Music Maker, die sind eigentlich nochmal unter Sonic Blast, ne? Die hätten eigentlich auch jetzt schon eine größere Beleuchtung verdient. Sonic Spinball gehört zu den Kandidaten fürs schlechteste Sonic-Spiel. Krass. Wurde damals vermarktet als der große neue Hit. Und wir haben es ja dieses Jahr Let's Played.
Sonic Spinball? Sure, it's not the best, but it's certainly not one of the worst Sonic games. Why is it on here? Well, you may have missed out on it, but I'm actually talking about the Game Gear version of Sonic Spinball.
Und die haben wir durchgespielt in Let's Play Sonic Origins Plus.
And why is it on here? It's hard. It's really, really hard. The controls just barely work, dude. You're dealing with the already unwieldy Spinball version of Sonic, but instead of being on the more powerful Genesis, or at the very least you get a wider view of where you're going, you're playing it on a screen the size of an iPhone 5. See, at least in the Mega...
Ich hab's mit Save States geschafft, ne? Ne, die dritte Stage ist total Pain. Die vierte wurde dann so vereinfacht, dass er egal ist.
Drive version of Spinball, they had the foresight to slow Sonic down a bit. You know, he really isn't that fast in the grand scheme of things, and it's because they knew that you were going to need fast reaction times already to try and get to where you needed to be. But on the Game Gear, Sonic's speed is constantly fluctuating, especially while simply rolling down a slope. Sonic can go at a crawl, then immediately speed up, then start slowing down again. They made a physics-based pinball platformer where the physics barely work. If anybody ever tells you a game can't be bad just because it's hard, I implore you to sit them down and make them play the Game Gear version of Sonic Spinball. I've never passed the first level.
Never passed the first level. Ich glaube, da übertreibt er jetzt ein bisschen. Das ist schon sehr schlecht, aber... Sonic N ist dieser super schlechte Port von Sonic Advance auf Nokia N-Gage, die Hybridkonsole von Nokia. Und der Bildschirmausschnitt, das ist halt schon das Problem. Du hast einen 2D-Jump'n'Run und der Bildschirmausschnitt ist halt so. Normalerweise ist es halt, ich sehe mich gespiegelt, ist es halt in die Breite, ne, 16:9 bestenfalls. Aber in Nokia war es halt Hochformat und du konntest nicht nach links und rechts gucken. Aber das wird er jetzt bestimmt erklären und zeigen.
Similarly enough, here we have the rare and obscure Sonic N, released on the N-Gage in 2003. What was advertised as this revolutionary hybrid of a handheld game console and mobile phone. Playing games on a phone. What fucking loser would want to do that? What a bad idea. Anyways,
jetzt guckt euch doch mal den Bildschirmausschnitt. Ja, bei dem Bosskampf geht's.
If you're looking at the footage right now and are thinking it looks familiar, then you'd be right to say so. Good eyes on you, sir. Here's a gold star. Sonic N is nothing more than a port of the game.
Ja, aber guck mal. Du musst nach links und rechts gucken. Du siehst ja noch weniger. Die Hauptkritik an Sonic-Spielen, dass du Reaktionsvermögen, du siehst nicht viel, wird darum auf die Spitze getrieben.
Boy, Advance released Sonic Advance. Wow, Mark. I didn't realize you were part of the anti-Sonic Advance squad. What did it ever do to you? Slow your roll, amigo. This game isn't bad because it's Sonic Advance. It's bad because I can barely see the fucking thing. Being a phone in the early 2000s, the screen of the N-Gage was very vertical, meaning that it's just Sonic Advance with half the screen chopped off, making it an extremely hard challenge to be able to tell what's coming up ahead of you. I mean, even they clearly thought this, by including the option to play it at a normal 4:3 aspect ratio, with top...
So, du kannst es dann so einstellen, seht ihr das? Es gab eine Einstellung, etwa spielt so, wie es gesehen wurde, oder es gibt oben und unten Ränder. Der ganze Bildschirm wird nochmal viel kleiner dadurch. Er hat zwar das alte Format und ist aber super pixelig, unscharf und man sieht es noch kleiner. Hä?
Bottom borders, but at that point, why aren't you just playing the GBA version like a normal human being? Sonic N really isn't the worst thing in the world, but I think the fact that this dumb idea got through production...
Und ich habe das gesehen in irgendeinem Elektronikmarkt damals und dachte mir so, soll ich mir jetzt Sonic N kaufen? Obwohl ich gar kein N-Gage habe, so als Sammlerstück, dachte ich schon 2003 oder 2004, wann das war. Hätte ich mal, ne? Hätte ich mal. Ich habe mal später auf eBay geguckt, habe mir auch nochmal überlegt, so, soll ich mir das kaufen? Ach nee, lass es.
To the point of actually being released is enough to at least mention it on the list.
Oha, das hatten wir schon bei Tweet.
Wait, Sonic X got an official video game that wasn't some crappy Flash nonsense? What the fuck, I haven't heard about this, that sounds awesome! That it does, my fellow fanboy. But alas, Sonic X was released on the Leapster, and is a BB game for boobies. I have no idea why they went with a baby game based on Sonic X of all things. Sure, the show was wildly popular with kids, but it had some dark shit in it too.
Come on!
I was more of a V-Smile guy myself, so I had no experience with this one as a kid, but I just find it weird that this thing exists. It's a weird hodgepodge of Sonic assets, like a fucking modified Sonic 3 sprite that gives him green eyes to match the modern design. But all it's used for is a game in which you get locked off into certain small areas and have to complete simple math problems by grabbing numbers in the right order. Fun. I mean, hey, you can collect rings too. They don't do anything, but you can still do it. Fun. There are even 3 minigames you get to play. Aerial automations, Math Robot Roundup, and Eggman's Super Sucky Machine. Fun? Sonic X gets a 0 out of 10. Sonic Edgesoft would have been better.
Hey, habe ich letztes Test gemacht. Vor allen Dingen eben wurde Sucky auch auf beschissen übersetzt, ne? In den Untertitel stand Sucky Machine und dann nicht Saugmaschine, sondern beschissene Maschine. Hä?
No infant. I need a game that's more challenging for the gamers of today.
Habe ich euch ja gezeigt vor ein paar Monaten, okay? Sonic Genesis.
This isn't the type of challenge I meant. We all know the story behind Sonic Genesis. What was meant to be a simple port of the original Sonic the Hedgehog on Game Boy Advance to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the series ended up being...
Das sind wieder Glitch-Usings für Speedrunner. Stell das nicht so als Bug-Festival hin, bitte. Echt.
One of the most unpolished, buggy Sonic games of all time. First of all, the screen crunch here is atrocious. You can barely see what's coming up ahead of you, which is already a problem present with some of the levels in the Mega Drive version. This makes it especially hard in stages like
so hart reingezoomt, der Wahnsinn.
Labyrinth Zone and Scrap Reenact 3 that have those spinning spike balls. But beyond that, the frame rate is also awful. This thing chugs along so much you'd think your Game Boy...
Ne, die Framerate, die geht nicht nur in die Knie, sondern die wird immer schneller und langsamer. Das heißt, mitten in einem Sprung wird es auf einmal Slow-Mo und dann doch wieder schnell und du springst deswegen falsch in Abgründe und sowas. Aber ich hoffe, er kommt noch auf den Punkt zu sprechen, dass die Fans einen richtigen Port davon gemacht haben.
He's gonna explode while playing, it's struggling so much. This ends up fucking up a lot of the timing with jumps and shit, making certain parts borderline impossible. To be fair though, we do have the bonus anniversary mode, which is actually being brought back in the newly announced Sonic Origins. So just what extras do we have for that? You can spin dash. Yay. Simply looking at the footage of this one is enough to see why it's bad. How does a company fuck up so badly at porting one of the most popular games ever? Hell, even Java phones had better ports of Sonic 1, and that one uses the Sonic Advance logo for the rings. But again, it is a port of an already existing game, so can you really say it's the worst Sonic game out there, or simply the worst Sonic port? That's up for you to decide, but funnily enough, some absolute Chad out there decided that they were going to take it upon themselves to also port the original Sonic to the GBA, to see if it was possible for it to be done good and prove that Sega are just generally incompetent, which, you know, they've done a fine enough job at proving themselves over the years. But they did it, and it's a 1-to-1 port of Sonic 1 in the Game Boy Advance. Despite the screen crunch, this is just as good as the original Sonic. Wow, what a great job. Who made this thing? Oh, okay, one of the main guys who went on to make Sonic Mania.
Ich dachte, ich muss die ganze Geschichte nochmal aufrollen. Ne? Stealth hat sich damals gedacht, das kann man doch auf ein GBA umsetzen. Er hat's gemacht und jetzt macht er, ja, hat Sonic Mania gemacht.
Original Sonic. Wow, what a great job. Who made this thing? Oh, okay, one of the main guys who went on to make Sonic Mania. That makes sense.
Alter, Sonic Chronicles, das RPG für DS. Haben auch schon viele Leute gefragt, Markus, let's play doch mal. Und immer wieder gucke ich es an und denke mir so, ich kann das nicht. Ich kann das nicht. Nur Touch-Steuerung. Niemals funktioniert ein Knopf. Nicht im Titelmenü, nichts. Das Spiel funktioniert nur mit Touch-Steuerung. Es kotzt.
Sonic Chronicles was so elusive to me as a kid. I'd always see it in magazines and wonder what the fuck it was. So I finally decided to ask for my birthday one year, and I played it for 15 minutes, got confused, and never touched it for years.
Gut so. Sonic Chronicles war das erste Spiel, wo ich im Internet dann mich schlau gemacht habe im Spin-Dash-Forum, die Neuigkeiten, was könnte, weil der Name ist durchgesickert und die Leute haben vermutet, was hinter dem Titel Sonic Chronicles stecken kann und sie haben die größten Sachen vermutet. Eigentlich schon so eine Sonic Generations-Sache, dass du die früheren Sachen zurückkehrst oder eine Origin-Story. Manche haben gesagt, boah, das ist dann mit Sonic ZM, mit Sally und so. Und ich denke mir so, Bruder, ja, was kommt raus? Das da.
I'm pretty sure this was my first exposure to an RPG. I actually decided a few years later to try and play through it again, and ended up beating the whole thing and enjoyed it quite a bit. But I don't know how, because each time I've tried to pick it up after then has been a completely miserable experience. Sonic Chronicles was made by BioWare, a company known for making some pretty good RPGs, so naturally everyone thought Sonic's first outing into the genre would be in good hands. That is until they dropped it out of their hands and into the B teams and rushed out this piece of shit. Honestly, I think this game's weakest aspect is the presentation. Like, sure, as RPGs go, it isn't anything special, but considering I have very little experience with the genre, basically only ever completing the 2 South Park games, I couldn't immediately tell of anything inherently awful about the gameplay of Chronicles. It's not fun, but I can imagine there are much worse. But where this game really fucks up in my opinion is in its god-awful presentation. This game opens up with this cheap-looking flash animation explaining the game's intro, which is originally much cooler and animated with frame by frame, before being scrapped for unknown reasons, probably for looking kinda goofy and off-model at times, like a brush of teeth through. But beyond the intro, the way it looks is just ugly. The world maps have this charming hand-drawn style, but over top it are these bizarre character models where the characters are just... And I'm sure we all know about the infamous music by now. Some of the tracks actually aren't that bad. I think the battle themes are definitely the highlights, but some of them are just unlistenable. Like, everybody remembers this classic remix of Big Arm's theme from Sonic 3.
Big Arms, aber, hä?
Or Diamond Dust Zone. The best thing about this game that I can think of are some of the funny character interactions you can have with some of the characters. Like, you can make Sonic an absolute prick in this if you wanted to. It serves no purpose, but I kinda think that's funnier, that you can choose to make Sonic an asshole for literally no reason. Sonic Chronicles definitely isn't the worst Sonic game out there, but it's a mess for sure.
Ich bin ein bisschen überrascht wegen Unleashed jetzt. Okay. Aber ja, Sonic Chronicles, ich muss es eigentlich irgendwann mal spielen. Vielleicht kommt der Tag, vielleicht aber auch nicht. Unleashed, pass auf, jetzt kommt ein Plot-Twist, dann nimmt die Handy-Version.
I was gonna put Sonic Unleashed on Java phones here because it's fucking Sonic Unleashed on a phone, but after checking it out, this game doesn't actually seem that bad. Like a lesser Sonic Rush. Huh.
Oha, Sonic Freeriders. Mit Xbox Kinect. Und es funktioniert einfach nicht. Ein Haier-Kandidat für das schlechteste Sonic-Spiel, das stimmt.
I don't know if I'm in the minority here, but as a kid, the Xbox Kinect blew me away. I didn't see the motion tracking issues or the lack of interesting gameplay. All I saw was that I could move my arm and see the video game copy me, and that was enough to sell me. What sold me even further? There's a fucking Sonic the Hedgehog game for the thing. I played Sonic Freeriders all the goddamn time when I was young, barely registering that I was basically tricked by Sonic into exercising for 10 hours a day. But when I went back to play it recently and after going online and hearing other people's thoughts on it, yeah, this game's terrible. Sonic Riders 1 was pretty good. Zero Gravity was a step down, but still alright. Freeriders barely functions. And it's all due to Sega's poor development for the Xbox Kinect.
Freeriders wird oft mit Trittbrettfahrer übersetzt. Man lernt immer was dazu, ne?
See, a lot of Kinect games have alright motion tracking, but in Freeriders it's next to unplayable. Even traversing the menus in this thing is a chore, without struggles to track your movements. As a kid, I vividly remember spending minutes on end trying to simply play a stage, but for some reason the thought never appeared in my head. Oh, maybe this game is just bad. This game also has way worse cutscenes compared to the other two. They were fully animated and they looked pretty expressive at times, despite Sonic's weird model. But in this one we just have generic PNGs moving around. Oh boy, what a trade-off. It's no wonder that this game...
Ja, es wurde aber auch low-budget entworfen, also da wird nicht sehr viel Geld reingesteckt, ist halt so der Punkt.
Killed a series, although I would like to see him tackle it again someday. I like the Sonic Racing trilogy. Transformed is my favorite kart racer of all time, but there's still something unique and more Sonic-y about the Riders franchise, and I hope to see it done again. At the very least, just bring back fucking Team Babylon, that's all
Ich find Sonic Riders scheiße!
I want to see. But yeah, no, Freeriders is an awful game. Really, really awful. So with all that being said, what's the worst Sonic game? Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer. I think all the games I talked about today are the worst in their own special way. Whether it be presentation-wise, in terms of gameplay, or just by being a stupid idea that should have never existed. but I think still we can all agree it's SonicJamOnTheGames.com. What the fuck is this?
Ja. Warum beleuchtet er es nicht? Warum beleuchtet er es nicht? Es gibt natürlich noch die für Tiger Electronics, ne, diese Game Watch-artigen. Aber die zählen für manche nicht. Er hat sogar gesagt, er hat die Antwort geliefert.
Existed, but I think still we can all agree it's SonicJamOnTheGames.com. What the fuck is this?
Gamecom. Jetzt sage ich das so ganz kurz, ne, habe ich schon oft genug gemacht. Sonic Tiger Electronics. Das könnte man auch nehmen, also schlechteste Spiel. Das sieht so aus. Das ganze Spiel sieht so aus. Ne? Und weil es so schön war, gibt es davon auch irgendwie 3-4 Teile. Es gibt eine Werbung.
It's Sonic 3, the handheld game, with a spin-dashing hedgehog and crazed caterpillars. Merciless monkey dude. And a feisty little guy called Knuckles who can make your life miserable.
Prepare for landing at Angel Island.
Yes! Sonic 3, the...
Ja. Ending. Boah, ich will das Ending angucken. Ja. Ja, Game over. Ja. Wir müssen jetzt das Spiel angucken von, oh, ich muss zurückgehen.
Let me ask you this.
Ups, der hat nichts Neues.
Let me ask you this. What is
Okay, und Name erklärt uns jetzt zu Sonic Gamecom. Jetzt müssen wir wirklich zu dem schlechtesten Sonic-Spiel kommen. Let's go.
the worst Sonic game that you have ever played? What game comes to mind when you hear this question?
Seid ihr
It
bereit?
is Sonic 06 because of its terrible controls, ton of bugs, and the permanent stain it put on Sonic as a whole? Is it Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric because of its infamous bugs, terrible graphics, and putting another massive stain on Sonic as a whole? Is it something like Sonic 4 because it's a painfully mediocre sequel to what a huge majority consider the greatest Sonic game of all time, having terrible graphics, controls, and levels? Or maybe it's one of the other terribly received Sonic games that exist. Whatever it is, while you're completely entitled to your opinion and I respect it, you're wrong. Because what if I told you that there is a game even worse than all of these games? One that I almost never see
Ja
mentioned.
gut, Sonic Schoolhouse fehlt immer noch. Sonic Schoolhouse ist ganz, der eben wollte auch irgendwie Sega Sonic Waku Waku Patrol Card zeigen, hat er vergessen. Oder doch nicht eingebaut. Sonic Schoolhouse ist auch ganz, das ist kein Spiel im Endeffekt, ne, deswegen.
Ever in any discussion of bad Sonic games despite being objectively worse than all of them. That game being Sonic Jam.
Nicht für Sega
Now I can
Saturn.
already hear some of you say, wait, isn't Sonic Jam a good Sonic game? And you'd be right. It's a great enhanced collection of the first 4 mainline Sonic games ported to the Sega Saturn with extra bonuses like character info, concept art, music, a lot of artwork in general, official Sonic animations, videos, and advertisements at the time, the first ever release of the fully uncropped and high quality version of the Sonic CD intro, as well as an entire goddamn fully 3D world called Sonic World where you could freely run around as Sonic and complete challenges as well. For the time it released in Sonic
Wollen wir eigentlich hier Untertitel? Er nuschelt leider auf Englisch sogar ein bisschen.
Jam is an amazing collection packed to the punch with a boatload of extra bonuses and Sonic history for die-hard Sonic fans to enjoy. However, it's not the Sonic Jam that we're talking about today. You see, Sonic Jam wasn't just released for the Saturn. Sonic Jam also came out for the Gamecom. And this is the version of the game that I'm gonna be yapping about today. So go get some drinks, make some popcorn, and get comfortable in your bed because I'm gonna tell you why this game f***ing sucks and why it is, in my opinion, the worst Sonic game of all time.
He said it! He said it!
Ja. Sag mal los.
Now, some background knowledge on the Gamecom because I'm certain that most of you have never heard of this thing ever in your life. The Gamecom, written as game.com but the dot is silent so it's pronounced Gamecom for some stupid f***ing reason, was a handheld device released in 1997 as a competitor to the Game Boy. 8 years after the Game Boy released.
Es ist nicht, haben wir nicht ein Mock-Video dazu angesehen? Es ist nicht viel besser als der Game Boy technisch, nachdem es bereits bessere wie Atari Lynx und Sega Game Gear einfach nicht geschafft, um dran zu kommen. Gamecom war ein massiver Flop.
It was also made by Tiger Electronics. You know, the company that made those shitty licensed LCD handhelds that felt more like
Das ist echt dieselbe Werbung. Was ist denn jetzt los? Ja, aber ich glaube, die Electronics sind noch magerer als das für Gamecom. Ich glaube schon.
Like toys for parents to shut their kids up with rather than actual game consoles. Despite all these things though, the Gamecom did have some things up its sleeve. It was the first console to have a touchscreen, and it was the first handheld console to have internet. Only problem is both of them sucked. The touchscreen, while working perfectly fine, was only ever used for the main menu and some incredibly basic games, and the internet capabilities, while being impressive, was way too expensive for what it was. Not only did you have to pay $70 for the console itself,
Man könnte auch sagen, es war seiner Zeit voraus, ne? Mit Touchpen und Internet, also... Ja, das war auch das Problem.
but you also had to pay an extra $50 for a compatible modem, as well as an extra $20 for an internet cartridge. All of these add up to $140. And adjusting for inflation, this whole package would cost you a whopping $274 today. On top of that, you also had to be subscribed to a compatible internet service provider, which barely anyone had in 1997. All of this just to send and read email. You couldn't even look at images with this thing. Not to mention all the wonderful marketing for this console.
I was surprised for all the slackers, but nothing better to do than play games and surf the net all day. GameCom begs to be touched. Wires you to the internet, and it plays more games than you idiots have brain cells. Idiots have brain cells.
Man hat 10 Billionen Neuronen. Cell Brains, und es gibt nur 20 Spiele. Aber vor allen Dingen, da sieht man im Hintergrund, sieht im Hintergrund ein Sonic-Spiel, das sieht aber nicht aus wie das fertige Sonic Jam, oder?
That shit is fucking trash, dog. Get the
Gamecom Pocket Pro, the only portable cartridge system that plays Resident Evil 2.
Oh mein Gott. Haben sie mit geflext, dass es Resident Evil 2 auf einem Portable System gibt und dann kommt es für die Switch raus. Meine Güte.
That shit is fucking trash, dog. Get the
Gamecom Pocket Pro, the only portable cartridge system that plays Resident Evil 2.
With all this information in mind, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that this thing flopped, selling less than 300,000 units and lasting only 3 years before being discontinued. During those 3 years, only a pathetic 20 games released for the system, most of which being licensed games from different IPs that Tiger got the licenses to that were made in-house, with one of them being Sonic the Hedgehog. And that's how this game came to be. Now with all of that aside, how do you even play this game in current day? Well, you can obviously just buy the console and the game itself on an online second-hand store like eBay and play it on real hardware the way it was intended. The problem is...
Sammler machen das.
It's a bit expensive. And I feel like that's way too much for an incredibly shitty experience. Also, the screen of the Gamecom is incredibly small, has no backlight, and is prone to ghosting to add to injury. So your best bet is to emulate it on your PC. You have two options for emulation. The first one is using the emulation program called MAME.
Also es ist so scheiße, die Konsole. Aber warum konnten sie dann Firmen wie Sega überreden, die Spiele dafür zu lizenzieren überhaupt, ne? Also.
This was how I was originally gonna play it, but I found it personally incredibly confusing to set up, and from what I've seen, the emulation isn't that great either. So your best bet is by using the official emulator that the developers of Gamecom games used. I'm not kidding, this shit leaked way back in 2011 for everybody to use. It even includes the source code for the Frogger game made for the system. I also found a link on Reddit that
Ich habe auch einen Emulator benutzt, um Sonic Jam für Gamecom zu zeigen, aber frag mich nicht, was für einen und wie und was überhaupt, ne? Es war auf jeden Fall buggy as hell.
Use the emulator and a guide on how to use it, which I'll link in the description down below. Alright, I think I said enough. Let's just get to the game already. I don't know how to transition into the next part of the video.
Tiger. Was ist das, ein Gamecom Thank You? Das ist wie der Blumentopf in Mad Monster Mansion.
When you start up the game, you get greeted by a title screen similar to the one on the Saturn version. After pressing A, you get brought to the game selection screen, and there's already an issue. We haven't even gone into the gameplay itself, and it already has an issue. So you know how Sonic Jam is supposed to be a collection of the first 4 mainline Sonic games, right? Right, okay. So where the f is Sonic 1?
Aber die Spiele sind das nicht mal, ne? Das kommt noch dazu. Es soll nur im Entferntesten danach aussehen.
Yeah, for some reason, the first ever Sonic game, the one that kickstarted it all, the one that is the sole reason these games exist in the first place, is just left out. I get that this was probably due to either hardware or time constraints, but why Sonic 1? It's the most well-known Sonic game out of them all. Why couldn't you have... whatever.
Weil damals Aktualität noch mehr zählte. Sonic 2, 3 und Knuckles sind halt aktueller und deswegen aus denen ihrer Sicht vermutlich wichtiger gewesen als das alte Sonic.
Let's just move on. After picking a game, you then get to decide who you want to play as out of the main trio, and afterwards, the actual game begins. Right off the bat, you're immediately popped into the game and dear God, what are these controls? Without a doubt, this may be the worst way that you've ever controlled in a Sonic.
Ihr habt keine Vorstellung. Spielt das. Spielt das. Ihr habt keine Ahnung, wie das sich steuert. Wir schauen uns das an und ihr werdet versuchen zu verstehen, wie die Steuerung funktioniert. Ich sage euch, sie funktioniert viel schlechter und anders, als ihr denkt.
Game, unless you count the Sonic Riders Connect game, but I haven't played that game myself, so don't take my word for it. Control and speed are two of the most important things to get right in every Sonic game, and this game throws both of them out of the window. The game runs unbearably slowly, which, considering this is a Sonic game, is not what you want. You are also unbearably slippery, which makes the game feel like you're on ice the whole time. You can also barely walk up on slopes without sometimes having to unnecessarily walk back to gain speed or spin dash. The physics in this game are horrid. You descend way too quickly, which combined with the slow speed and small game window makes all the platforming segments in this game nearly impossible to
Dann noch sterben. Es gibt unten einfach Abgrund. Das gucken wir uns nochmal an die Szene.
Slow speed and small game window makes all the platforming segments in this game nearly impossible to do. And the spin dash is... fine. It works the way intended. Speaking about spin dashing, I wanna talk about all the characters and their abilities. Sonic is a default basic character. He can jump, spin dash, and that's all he can do. Self-explanatory. Tails can jump, spin dash, and also fly, which makes the game easier. More about him later. Knuckles is the exact same as Sonic. No gliding, no wall climbing, no nothing.
Oh, weiß ich nicht mehr. Hab ich das mal ausprobiert? Der kann nix.
Just a jump and a spin dash. There's no benefit to picking Knuckles unless he's your favorite character. Here's a tip if you want to play this game yourself. Always pick Tails. He's the only way you're ever gonna be able to get far in this game thanks to his flight being absolutely broken in this game, and you skip huge portions of the level because they were not designed with flight in mind at all. So yeah, unless you want to challenge or you're a masochist, pick Tails if you just want to experience the game. Moving on to the levels themselves, remember what I said earlier about the game lying about being a collection of the first 4 main 9 Sonic games? Well, they lied even more, because none of these levels exist in the original games. They were all completely new levels built from the ground up just for this game using some sprites for the first level of the game it's based on. Each game has 5 stages with 2 of them featuring bosses, and that's it. Other than that, they would be okay if it wasn't for the god-awful controls making them worse than they seem. If the controls were actually good, then these would be some okay mid-tier levels at best. Fun fact, from what I've heard, this game uses a bitmap system instead of a tile-based system like most Game Boy games, which means that one level is one whole ass image instead.
What? Again, a whole map because it's using bitmap system. Bei Unloading Sprites. Ach so, also das System stellt immer das komplette Level dar, egal ob man sieht oder nicht. Das ist ja scheiße.
Instead of texture atlases and metadata. This explains why the game is so slow. The Gamecom just barely handles displaying an entire image, resulting in the slowdown. Moving on, for the last part of this video, I wanna talk about some of the highlights of what I experienced this game. But before I do that, I wanna talk about the music for a little bit.
Warum kann man da nicht hochlaufen?
I've been holding this game, but before I do that, I wanna talk about the music for a little bit. I've been holding off of showing the music, and there's a good reason for that.
Jetzt gönnt euch mal den Soundtrack.
A Sonic game's music could potentially be the saving grace
nimmt richtig Anlauf, okay.
For the entire thing. If there's a Sonic game that sucks but has good music, all the defenders of it will use it as an argument in favor of the game. So if this game wants to bump up its rating by a few digits, then it needs to have a soundtrack that is the equivalent of a job for your ear. So, how does the music sound like? Well, that's something. This is such a boring, lifeless nothingness of a soundtrack. Each song has like the exact same BPM, it's so damn bland. What are these even supposed to? Oh. So if you speed up the soundtrack by about 2 times speed, you can actually make out what Sonic songs are based off. I guess this makes the OST a little better. Doesn't change the fact that it's still boring as f, so who cares? Now with that out of the way, I wanna talk about some of the highlights of my playthrough of this game. The first being this section from the second stage of Sonic 2, where you have to jump your way to the other side, and if you fail then you fall in the bottomless pit and die. With the shitty physics and small game window, this makes this part of the stage almost impossible to get through unless you're using tails. Annoying as hell. In the Sonic 3 part of the game, I found a giant ring which leads me to the Blue Sphere stage, except it's renamed to Black Sphere because the game could only display in black and white. These motherfuckers are the even doppelgangers of Blue Spheres. In the same Sonic 3 stage, I tried to go up the 3D tree that was in the original game, which would have been kinda cool if not for the fact that if you press any button during this, you fall back down and the game softlocks you, leaving you no choice but to kill yourself. The last highlight that I want to mention is the X-Scorcher Mark III boss in Sonic 3, which normally in the original game would go behind the waterfall and then pop out at a certain point to attack. But in this game, thanks to the hardware limitations, he doesn't go behind the waterfall visually except for one singular visual indication that you can easily miss, so you better pay attention or die! The bosses in this game are just a pain in the ass in general, thanks to the shitty hitboxes and bad physics of the game. I didn't get to beat this game, however, I've experienced enough as is.
Yeah.
Let's get on to my final thoughts. Sonic Jam for the Gamecom is, without any singular doubts, the worst Sonic game of all time. This title has been given to multiple Sonic games over the years, but what makes this game stand out from those games is that there are zero redeeming qualities about it. No exaggeration. Terrible graphics, terrible controls, terrible physics, boring, soulless music, game-breaking bugs. It's hard to point out something positive in this game. At least with other bad Sonic games, there are still some qualities you can easily point out. Sonic 06 has some pretty good level design. Sonic Lost World has some pretty interesting controls that work very well. The Sonic Boom games had some pretty interesting ideas. The Storybook games have some of the best characterization of Sonic. Sonic Blast has some good bosses. I could go on. What I'm saying is this game has nothing going for it. Nothing. Nothing at all. Its only purpose is to ruin your day and that's it. And all of these reasons are why, in my opinion, Sonic Jam for the Gamecom is the worst Sonic game of all time.
Ist halt so.
Now, I gotta reiterate that what you view as the worst Sonic game is up to you to decide. This video wasn't made to change people's opinion. I just made it to talk about what I personally think is the worst Sonic game. You can disagree with me on this and say that Sonic 06 is a worse game than this because it had a much more negative impact on the series, or that Sonic Blast is a worse game because you personally had a worse time with it than this. At the end of the day, everyone has differing opinions because everyone is different. And that's fine, that's good. You just need to be respectful towards each other and that's it. I'd personally love to hear your thoughts about it.
Ja, aber jeder, der das hier ausprobiert hat, wird derselben Meinung sein. Es probieren halt nur nicht viele aus.
What your personal worst Sonic game of all time is and why. So feel free to comment it down below. And don't forget to be respectful towards each other. Please don't start all out wars in the comment section over the blue anthropomorphic hedgehog. Thank you so much for watching this video about me rambling about a shitty obscure late 90s Sonic game. I hope that this video was good and that you at least somewhat enjoyed it. Side note, I genuinely do not recommend you playing this unless you wanna laugh at the game by yourself or with your friends. It is not worth your precious time. Oh shoot, I almost forgot. Apparently there was also meant to be a Sonic 3D Blast port for the Gamecom, but it got cancelled. I mean, I like Sonic 3D Blast. I think it's a good game. So I'm happy that it got cancelled because they didn't get to ruin it. But anyways, once again, thank you for watching this video.
Sonic 3D Blast für Gamecom, ja.
Make sure to get your daily
Nach dem großen Erfolg.
water intake and stay hydrated. Make sure to eat and drink healthy. Make sure to go outside and enjoy the beauty of nature and breathe in some fresh air. Unless it's summer, in which case you should stay inside.
Ach komm, schweif nicht so aus.
Play Sonic 3D Blast. Bye!
Kein Grund so auszuschweifen. Video ist lang genug. Kriegst aus einen Daumen hoch. Interessant. Aber wisst ihr, es gibt noch einen Titel, der es tatsächlich noch aufnimmt. Eine Veröffentlichung für Sonic für den GBA. Ich meine nicht Sonic Genesis. Es gibt noch eine Sache. Gibt's denn? Da ist es, da ist es. Dieses Spiel könnte es noch weiter übertreffen. Das Problem ist, man kann es wohl kaum als Spiel gelten lassen. Können wir es sehen? GBA-Video. Da vielleicht?
Shut the door.
Wenn man das Spiel zählen lässt, diese Veröffentlichung,
And you can.
dann ist dieses Spiel das niedrigste, was ein Sonic-Spiel verdient hat. An Wertung, sag ich mal so.
I'll go through the
Not kompatibel mit dem Game Boy Player.
buttons in a minute.
Wisst ihr, was man damit machen kann mit dieser Game Boy Veröffentlichung? Von Majesco. Und 4Kids.
Screen that doesn't show the lines. Click on one of the episodes.
Man hat die Steuerung, okay.
And you get the button. Locks all.
Und dann kann man sich die ersten 2 Folgen von Sonic X auf deinem GBA anschauen. Nicht auf dem Game Boy Player, weil sonst könntet ihr es auf dem Fernseher sehen.
Look at the Game Boy Advance.
Da kann sie beiden auswählen und du kannst halt auch die Helligkeit und die Lautstärke verändern und vor- und zurückspulen. Das sind einfach 2 Folgen, nicht mehr, nicht weniger, von Sonic X auf deinem GBA. Und das ist so wenig Spiel, dass vermutlich sogar Sonic Jam für Gamecube mehr bietet, oder?
Yes, beware the Game Boy Advance video. That is Sonic X. Card. Screen, I'm not sure. But that isn't because of how it is. That's just.
Ich meine, es läuft einfach so für umsonst im Fernsehen, aber in einer Qualität, die viel besser ist, aber das Video ist lang genug. Ich hoffe, ihr habt was gelernt über die schlechtesten Sonic-Spiele, die es gibt. Was ist in eurer Ansicht nach das schlechteste Sonic-Spiel aller Zeiten? Ihr kennt jetzt die heißesten Kandidaten. Schreibt es in die Kommentare. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Gute!